The world went dark the day they decided 24 years of my life was worth nothing more than a cardboard box. My name is Ricardo, and for over 2 decades, the scent of hot metal and machine oil had been my perfume, the rhythmic clang of machinery my symphony. I wasn't just a foreman at Vibrations Industrials in Seville, Spain. I was its pulse. We crafted high-precision industrial components for the colossal energy sector parts where a hairline fracture could mean catastrophic failure and lives lost. Every nut, every bolt, every weld was a silent promise of safety, a vow I personally upheld. My crew, my machines, they were my family, my legacy. Then, one crisp Monday morning, the sterile scent of lemon polish filled the air, a stark contrast to the familiar grit of the factory. Isabella, from Human Resources, a woman whose smile rarely reached her eyes, summoned me to the conference room. My stomach tightened. Across the polished mahogany table sat Mesha Solar, the new operations director. He'd been with us barely 4 months, a man whose hands were suspiciously clean, his shirts impeccably pressed. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a glossy magazine, not a factory floor. He'd only ever graced my domain during mandated safety tours, gliding through like a tourist in a museum. "Ricardo," Isabella began, her voice as smooth and cold as the tabletop, "we're implementing some operational changes." She slid a folder across, its contents a death knell to my career. Mesha's nodded, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Market pressures, competitive restructuring," he droned, spewing corporate jargon like a broken faucet. I opened the folder. "Severance package," the words mocked me, printed starkly on the page. 2 weeks to train my replacement. Half my pension would vest immediately. The other half, a trickle of monthly payments. The company logo at the top of the page looked alien. They'd redesigned it last year, without a word to any of us who bled for the place. "Your replacement starts tomorrow," Isabella added, her tone as casual as if she were announcing the cafeteria special. "Javier Vega. He's got a business degree from the University of Barcelona. Very promising." I closed the folder slowly, my gaze drifting to the intricate wood grain of the table, searching for answers in its patterns. 24 years, not a single major accident. 346 souls had gone home safe, day after day, under my unwavering watch. I had built the safety protocols they still followed, implemented the rigorous maintenance schedules, and personally trained every foreman and lead technician on that floor. "I understand," I managed, the words a bitter taste in my mouth. Mesha's looked visibly relieved. Isabella's thin smile barely touched her eyes, a chilling testament to their calculated indifference. That night, I drove home the long way, past the Guadalquivir River, where the old shipyards once stood. My father, a man whose hands bore the permanent scars of honest labor, had worked there before the companies moved their operations south. "Ricardo," he used to tell me, his voice rough with wisdom, "a man's worth is in what he builds, not what he says." I had built something at Vibrations Industrials, a system, a culture, an impeccable safety record. Now, I had 2 weeks to hand it all over to a fresh-faced kid who wouldn't even comprehend the intricate, life-saving edifice he was about to dismantle. When I finally reached my quiet apartment, I called Paco, an old colleague who'd retired last year. "They're letting me go," I told him, the words still sharp and raw. "Cabrones," he swore, a true friend's indignation. "Are you going to raise hell?" "No," I replied, staring at my worn work boots by the door, still caked with 2 decades of factory floor grime that never quite washed out. "But they'll realize soon enough. Some knowledge doesn't transfer in 2 weeks." I hung up, a strange sense of calm settling over me. They had no idea what they were losing. I had started at Vibrations Industrials when my daughter, Sophia, was just a year old. My wife, Elena, and I had been married 4 years, and that job had promised stability, health insurance, a future. 3 shifts a week at first, then supervisor after 3 years, assistant foreman after 7, and finally lead foreman after old Juan Carlos retired. The factory floor was my second home. I knew every machine by its unique hum, its subtle vibration. I could tell when the number 3 press was struggling before any warning light flickered to life. I could spot a safety risk from across the far end of the room, smell when the hydraulic fluid needed changing, feel when the ambient temperature was off by even a single degree Celsius. Elena used to tease me, saying I cared more about that factory than our own house. Perhaps she was right. After she left 10 years ago, taking Sophia with her to the Canary Islands, I poured every ounce of myself into the job. Holidays, weekends, even during the rare downpours when half the crew couldn't make it in. The company changed hands twice during my tenure. First, Grupo Industrial del Sur in 2011. They kept most things the same. Then, Axioma Capital acquired us in 2020. These were private equity types, all algorithms and efficiency metrics. They started trimming what they called excess capacity immediately. I noticed the changes slowly, subtly at first. Maintenance budget cuts, cheaper parts suppliers, longer intervals between machine servicing. They replaced 3 of my best mechanics with contract workers, reduced the inventory of critical replacement parts, and started pushing production quotas higher, relentlessly, every single quarter. 6 months ago, Meisha's Solar arrived, fresh out of business school, armed with his MBA and his infernal spreadsheets. He called the floor, meeting his first week. "We're implementing new performance tracking across all departments," he announced, his voice devoid of any real understanding of our work. Data-driven decision-making is the future of manufacturing. After the meeting, my lead machinist, Esteban, a man who'd been on the floor almost as long as I had, pulled me aside. "Ricardo," he whispered, his eyes filled with a familiar apprehension. "This guy's going to be trouble." He asked me if we could modify the safety lockout procedure to save time. I brushed it off, then told Esteban we'd manage, just as we always had. But the warning signs kept appearing, like dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Meisha's stopped attending the monthly safety reviews. Emails about critical equipment maintenance went unanswered. My requests for training budget were denied not once, not twice, but 3 times. Then they hired 3 junior supervisors, barely out of college, who started questioning procedures we'd refined over decades, procedures forged in sweat and experience. Ricardo, one of them, a fresh-faced youth named Carlos, asked, "Is it really necessary to run a full diagnostic after every shift change?" Another, Miguel, chimed in, "These daily inspections seem excessive. The manual only recommends weekly checks." I started keeping my own meticulous records, dating and photographing every maintenance request, documenting every single conversation about safety concerns. Something deep inside told me I might need proof someday, proof of what we've been doing right all these years. I just didn't expect to be shown the door so soon. The kid they brought in to replace me, Javier Vega, showed up on his first day in dress shoes and a tie. 28 years old, with gelled hair and a tablet he checked obsessively every 5 minutes. "I'm really excited to learn from you before taking over," he said, extending a firm, practiced handshake, just like they teach in business school. "I've already reviewed all the production metrics and identified several efficiency opportunities." I nodded, a tight knot in my gut, and handed him a pair of steel-toed boots and safety glasses. Floor tour first, metrics later. For 2 weeks, I walked Javier through everything, patiently showing him the maintenance schedules, the intricate safety protocols, the confidential personnel files. I introduced him to every shift supervisor and lead operator, sharing the stories behind the faces, the nuances of each role. But as the days passed, a chilling realization dawned on me. He was meticulously taking notes about processes, but he was completely missing the people. He didn't ask Esteban about his son, who just joined the Spanish Navy. He didn't remember that Maria, on the assembly line, needed extra break time for her diabetes. He didn't understand that you had to gently coax the number 2 milling machine on cold mornings, speaking to it like an old friend. On my last Thursday, I overheard him talking to Meisha's in the break room, their voices low, conspiratorial. Once we implement the new shift schedule, we can probably consolidate 2 of the maintenance positions, Javier was saying, his voice filled with a naive confidence. And that safety redundancy Ricardo insists on for the hydraulic press, the manual doesn't require those extra checks. Macias nodded, pleased, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Exactly the fresh perspective we needed. They didn't see me standing there, just beyond the doorframe, a silent witness. I walked away quietly, a cold, hard knot settling in my stomach. These weren't just changes to save money. They were systematically dismantling the safeguards I'd built over decades, protections that kept people from losing fingers, arms, or worse. That afternoon, a grim resolve settled within me. I called an impromptu meeting with my most trusted people, Esteban, Maria, Antonio from maintenance, and Rafael, who ran the night shift. We met in the parking lot after work, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows. They're going to start cutting corners, I told them, my voice low and steady despite the tremor in my hands. And the new kid doesn't know what he doesn't know. What do you want us to do, Ricardo? Esteban asked, his face etched with worry. We can't just ignore the new boss. No, I agreed, looking each of them in the eye. But you can document everything. Keep your own records, and if things start going sideways with the equipment, I handed each of them my personal phone number, written on small index cards. Call me, not management. Me. I spent my final day clearing out my locker, the small, cramped space feeling suddenly cavernous. Javier was already sitting at my old desk, rearranging things, his tablet glowing with unfamiliar metrics. I handed him my keys, the familiar weight suddenly heavy in my palm. Any last advice? He asked, barely looking up from the screen. Yeah, I said, my voice quiet. Listen to the floor. The machines talk to you if you pay attention. He smiled politely, a blank, uncomprehending look in his eyes. I walked out without ceremony. No party, no cake, no speech. 24 years ended with a perfunctory handshake from Isabella in Human Resources and a parking lot exit badge that deactivated the moment I drove away. But I wasn't done with vibrations industrials. Not really. I was just waiting. 3 weeks after I left, Esteban called me, his voice low and urgent. They're changing the maintenance schedule on the hydraulic presses, he whispered, as if hiding in a supply closet. Pushing it from weekly to bi-weekly inspections. Document it, I said, my mind already racing. Note any pressure changes, any leaks, any unusual sounds. 2 days later, Antonio from maintenance called. They denied my parts order for the backup generator, said we can wait until the quarterly inventory. I kept a meticulous log of every call, every change, every corner cut. At 4 weeks, I decided to reach out formally. I drafted an email to Macias and Isabella, professional and to the point. I've heard some concerning reports about changes to safety and maintenance protocols. Having overseen these systems for over 2 decades, I'd be happy to consult regarding the potential risks these modifications might introduce. Isabella replied within the hour. Thank you for your concern, Ricardo. The transition has been smooth, and Javier has implemented several efficiency improvements already. We'll certainly reach out if we need your insight. Corporate speak for stay away. At 6 weeks, the first accident happened. Minor, a belt slipped on the number 3 press, causing a 2-hour shutdown. No one was hurt, thankfully. Then a small hydraulic leak in week 7. Then 3 separate electrical issues in week 8. Rafael called me after each incident, his voice growing increasingly agitated. The new guy's blaming the equipment, Ricardo. Says it's all outdated and poorly maintained. My blood boiled. That equipment had run flawlessly under proper care. By week 10, I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove to the plant during lunch break and waited in the parking lot. When Esteban came out, I waved him over to my truck. How bad is it really? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Esteban looked around nervously before answering. Bad. Production's down 15%. They fired Antonio last week. Said he was resistant to change. And Javier's got his college buddy running maintenance now. Guy couldn't tell a torque wrench from a screwdriver. Anyone been hurt? That was my biggest fear. Not yet. But Raphael almost lost a hand when a safety switch failed on the cutting line. Javier wrote it up as operator error. I made a decision then and there. I knew people at the Regional Industrial Safety Board. One call could trigger an immediate, unannounced inspection. The next morning, I made that call. I explained my concerns, my history with the plant, the specific changes that worried me. The inspector, a sharp woman named Camila Vargas, took detailed notes. We'll conduct an unannounced inspection within the next 2 weeks, she assured me, her voice calm and professional. I felt a surge of satisfaction. The system, slow as it might be, would correct itself. 3 days later, Esteban called again, panic evident in his voice. They know. Ricardo, someone told management you were behind the inspection request. Macias is going nuclear. My stomach dropped. What's happening? They've got us working overtime cleaning everything up, falsifying maintenance logs. The production lines are shut down so they can fix all the problems before the inspection. Then came the legal letter, hand-delivered to my house by courier. Vibrations Industrials was accusing me of malicious interference with business operations and violation of non-disclosure agreements. They threatened a lawsuit if I continued spreading false information about company practices. I called my lawyer, Arturo Herrera. He reviewed the letter, his brow furrowed. They're bluffing about the NDA violations, Ricardo. You haven't shared any proprietary information, but they could make your life difficult with legal fees alone. Can they stop the inspection? I asked, my voice tight. No. Once the safety board decides to inspect, it happens. But Ricardo, be careful. These corporate types play dirty when cornered. I hung up, anger mixing with a cold anxiety. They were trying to intimidate me into silence, all while hurriedly fixing the very problems I'd highlighted. But what would happen after the inspection passed? They'd go right back to cutting corners, only more carefully next time. I needed more than one inspection. I needed undeniable evidence of systemic negligence. The inspection came and went. Vibrations Industrials passed. Barely. Camila Vargas called me afterward. They fixed the immediate safety issues, she said. But I noted several concerns in my report. Their maintenance documentation was inconsistent. Several employees seemed rehearsed in their responses. Will there be penalties? I asked, my frustration mounting. Minor ones, Ricardo, not enough to change behavior long term. I thanked her and hung up, disappointed but not surprised. Companies like Vibrations Industrials knew how to navigate these situations, fix the visible problems, pay the small fines, return to business as usual. That weekend, my doorbell rang. It was Raphael, looking nervous and drawn on my front porch. Sorry to bother you at home. Ricardo, I needed to show you something away from the plant. He handed me a thumb drive, his hand trembling slightly. What's this? I asked, a sense of foreboding settling over me. Maintenance logs, he replied, the real ones, and the ones they created for the inspection, plus emails between Macias and corporate about the cost savings initiative. They've been planning these cuts for a year, before you were even let go. They needed someone who wouldn't push back like you did. I invited Raphael in, and we spent hours going through the files, the digital evidence illuminating a chilling truth. The picture that emerged was far worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just about replacing an expensive veteran with a cheaper junior manager. Vibrations Industrials was implementing a company-wide strategy of deliberate underinvestment in safety and maintenance, callously offsetting the increased risk of accidents against projected quarterly savings. One email from an Axioma Capital executive was particularly chilling. Insurance covers accidents. Missed earnings targets cost us investors. They were gambling with people's lives. My people. The ones I'd protected for 24 years. There's more, Raphael said, pointing to another folder on the screen. Javier knows the equipment is failing. Look at these maintenance requests he's denied. The list was staggering. Critical safety components, backup systems, preventive replacements all declined with the same terse note, deferred to next quarter per budget constraints. Why are you showing me this, Raphael? I asked, my voice hoarse. This could cost you your job. Raphael's expression hardened, a steely resolve replacing his earlier fear. Maria's nephew got hurt yesterday. Press guard failed. The one Javier said wasn't critical to replace. Kid's 19. Lost 2 fingers. They're calling it operator error, making him sign papers while he was still on pain meds. My hands clenched involuntarily. They can't do that. They are doing it, Raphael said, his voice grim. And it's only a matter of time before something worse happens. After Raphael left, I sat in my kitchen for hours. The evidence spread across my table like a grim prophecy. I was torn between searing fury and a profound sense of responsibility. These weren't just statistics on a spreadsheet. These were lives. People I'd worked alongside for decades. Families I knew. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the number for the safety board again, then stopped. Another inspection wouldn't be enough. Vibrations Industrials would clean up temporarily, pay another fine, and continue the cycle of neglect. No, this required a different, more impactful approach. I called Esteban, then Maria, then 6 other trusted veterans from the floor, my voice steady, imbued with a newfound purpose. We arranged to meet at Paco's house the next day, neutral territory, far from the prying eyes of the company. When everyone arrived, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I laid out everything I had learned, showing them the irrefutable evidence Raphael had provided. So, what do we do? Esteban asked, his voice raw with frustration when I finished. Go to the media? I shook my head. Not yet. First, we need leverage. What kind of leverage? Maria asked, her eyes sharp and intelligent. The kind that hits their bottom line, I said, the words heavy with intent. I'm going to need records of every shortcut, every failure, every near miss since I left. Documented, dated, photographed if possible. They'll fire anyone they catch collecting that information, Paco pointed out, ever the realist. I know, I said, meeting his gaze. That's why we need to be smart about this, and patient. I looked around at these people, skilled workers who deserved better than being treated as disposable parts in a corporate machine. Give me 2 weeks, I said, and whatever you do, keep your eyes open and stay safe. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost haunting Vibrations Industrials. I never set foot on the property, but my presence, my influence, was felt. Esteban and the others fed me information daily. Shift reports, equipment failures, safety incidents. I compiled everything meticulously, building a case that couldn't be dismissed, a mountain of evidence that would bury them. Meanwhile, I made 3 key moves, each one a calculated strike. First, I reached out to Diego Navarro, a former client who now worked for Vibrations Industrial's biggest customer, Energia Meridional. We met for coffee at a quiet diner 20 kilometers from the plant, away from any potential spies. Ricardo, good to see you, Diego said, shaking my hand warmly. Been wondering where you disappeared to. Forced retirement, I said, cutting to the chase. But that's not why I asked to meet. I showed him photos of defective pressure valves that had shipped from Vibrations Industrials in the past month, valves that would be installed in Energia Meridional systems, potentially with catastrophic consequences. These passed inspection? Diego asked, frowning, his professional instincts kicking in. The new inspection process. Yes, I confirmed, my voice grim. The corner cutting has consequences. Diego, I couldn't live with myself if something failed at one of your facilities. Diego studied the photos carefully, his expression growing more serious with each image. This is serious. Ricardo, we've got 30-year relationships with our suppliers, but safety comes first. All I'm asking is that Energy Meridional conducts its own quality audit, I said, meeting his gaze. See for yourself. My second move was contacting Camilla Vargas again at the safety board. This time, instead of general concerns, I provided specific, documented violations, complete with dates, times, and photographic evidence. This is much more substantial than before. Ricardo, Camilla said, her voice impressed. I'll need to bring my supervisor in on this. I understand, I told her. Just please keep my name out of it for now. The third move was the riskiest. I reached out to Javier Vega directly. I asked him to meet me for lunch, far away from the plant, choosing a small, unassuming tapas bar. To my surprise, he agreed. He looked tired when he showed up, dark circles under his eyes, his collar slightly askew. The sheen of youthful confidence had faded, replaced by a weary resignation. I appreciate you meeting me, I said after we ordered, watching him carefully. How's the floor running? Javier ran a hand through his gelled hair, a gesture of exasperation. Honestly, it's a mess. Equipment failing left and right. Corporates breathing down my neck about production targets. But I can't make quota with half the line breaking down every other day. They didn't tell you what you were walking into, did they? I asked, a touch of sympathy in my voice. They said the operation needed modernizing, that you were resistant to change, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. But every time I try to fix something, 3 more problems pop up. I nodded. That's because they dismantled a system that worked. Those maintenance schedules you scrapped? They weren't excessive. They were necessary. Mesha says the budget can't support that level of maintenance. And how's the budget looking with production down and quality issues rising? Javier's silence was answer enough. Listen, I said, leaning forward slightly, my voice low and earnest. I didn't ask you here to gloat. I asked because in about 2 weeks, several things are going to happen. Energy Meridional is going to demand a quality audit. The safety board is going to conduct another surprise inspection, and the evidence of systematic safety violations is going to land on several desks, including corporate headquarters. Javier paled, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. Are you threatening me? No, I said calmly, meeting his gaze. I'm giving you a choice. You can be the fall guy when this all comes crashing down the inexperienced manager who couldn't handle the job, or you can get ahead of it. How? He asked, his voice barely audible. By documenting everything Mesha's and corporate have pushed on you. Every maintenance request you submitted that was denied. Every safety concern that was dismissed. Javier stared at his untouched food, his mind clearly racing. They'll fire me. Maybe, I conceded, but you'd be doing the right thing, and you wouldn't have a preventable death on your conscience. I left Javier with my card. Think about it. You've got 1 week. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. I'm in. What do you need from me? The pieces were falling into place. Now, we just needed one final push. A situation that would force Vibrations Industrials to face the devastating consequences of their choices, a crisis point they couldn't ignore. As if on cue, the #1 hydraulic press, the very heart of the production line, catastrophically failed the next day. No injuries, thankfully, but production ground to a complete halt. The crisis point had arrived. My phone rang at 6:15 am. It was Mesha's Solar himself, his voice strained, stripped of its usual corporate arrogance. Ricardo, he said, the desperation palpable. We have a situation at the plant. So I've heard, I replied calmly, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. The shutdown had been all over the plant group chat by midnight. Look, I'll be direct. We need your expertise. The main press is down, production's halted, and we have orders backing up. Our maintenance team can't identify the problem. That's because you fired Antonio, who maintained that press for 15 years, I pointed out, my voice laced with a subtle challenge. Mesha's sigh was heavy. Can we set aside the past for now? The company is willing to bring you in as a consultant to get us operational again. I'm listening. 300 euros per hour, cash. No questions asked about how you fix it. We just need it running by the end of the week. I almost laughed. They thought this was about money. I'll be there in an hour, I said, a plan forming in my mind. But I have conditions. 1, I bring my own team, Esteban, Rafael, and Maria. 2, I have complete authority over repair decisions and parts orders. 3, I want access to all maintenance records for the past 6 months. Maisha hesitated, then, desperate, agreed. Fine, whatever it takes. When I walked into the plant an hour later, the floor was in chaos. Operators stood idle, their faces etched with uncertainty. Managers huddled in corners, whispering urgently. The massive hydraulic press sat silent and dark, a monument to corporate short-sightedness. Javier approached me immediately, his face pale and drawn. "Thank God you're here, Ricardo. It's worse than I thought." I nodded. "Let's see it." As I inspected the press, everything became horrifyingly clear. Multiple system failures caused by months of neglected maintenance. Exactly what I'd warned about. I turned to Maisha, who was hovering nearby, a nervous tick working at his jaw. "I can fix this, but first I need to show you something." I pulled out my phone and opened my email. "I just sent this report to Axioma Capital's executive team, the Regional Safety Board, and Energy Meridional Solutions. It details every safety violation, every corner cut, and every risk created by the policies you've implemented." Maisha's face drained of color. "You can't do that." "I already have," I said, my voice unwavering. "Now, do you want this press fixed or not?" 3 days. That's how long it took to fix the hydraulic press. A repair that should have been a simple maintenance issue if they'd followed my original schedules. During those 3 days, Vibrations Industrials experienced a whirlwind of consequences, a storm of their own making. Energy Meridional immediately suspended their orders, demanding a full quality review. The safety board arrived for another inspection, this one far more thorough and unyielding than the last. And Axioma Capital, their parent company, sent their own operations team to assess the chaotic situation. By day 3, Maisha's solar was gone, quietly reassigned to a meaningless corporate headquarters role. Javier remained, but in a reduced capacity, now reporting to a new operations director, Tomas Blanco, who had been swiftly dispatched from the parent company. Tomas Blanco, a no-nonsense man with tired eyes and an air of quiet authority, called me into his office after we got the press running again. "Impressive work, Ricardo," he said, his voice measured. "The corporate team has reviewed your documentation. Very thorough." I waited, saying nothing, allowing the silence to underscore the gravity of the situation. "We're implementing a complete overhaul of maintenance and safety protocols at all our facilities," Tomas continued, a hint of genuine concern in his voice. "And we'd like to offer you a position, Director of Manufacturing Operations for Vibrations Industrials." I considered the offer, the title, the return to the place that had been my second home. "At what salary?" Tomas named a figure 30% higher than I'd been making before, and complete autonomy over maintenance schedules and safety procedures within budget constraints. "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "That's the problem. Safety can't be budgeted quarter by quarter. It's a constant, non-negotiable investment." I stood to leave, then paused. "I'll consult 3 days a week at my hourly rate. I'll help you rebuild the systems I created, train your people properly, and get production back to where it should be. But I won't be an employee again." Tomas considered this, his gaze steady, then nodded. "Acceptable." I didn't go back for the title, or even for the increased money. I went back for Esteban, and Maria, and Rafael, and all the others who deserved to work in a safe environment, free from the callous disregard of corporate greed. I went back to rebuild what I'd spent 24 years creating, what they had so carelessly dismantled. When I walked onto the floor the next Monday, the machines were already humming more smoothly, their rhythm a familiar comfort. They knew their old caretaker had returned.